The recent release of the Castlevania Dominus collection represents some of Koji Igarashi's best work, and the first time these DS exclusives have been available on other platforms. As well as that, this collection includes quite a few things I haven't heard anyone speak about. And of course, we'll have a look at how the game runs in handheld, look at frame rates, and why, in my opinion at least, this is one of the best collections that we've ever had from any company. Is Castlevania Dominus about to dominate your backlog? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. Let's start with what the collection includes. You've got the Castlevania Order of Ecclesia game, Portrait of Ruin, and Dawn of Sorrow, but you've also got the Haunted Castle, the Japanese release of the side-scrolling action game, and what amounts as a remake of Haunted Castle in Haunted Castle Revisited. That's 5 games for the price of, well, less than half. Throw in the fact that you've got a gallery that includes all of the artwork, original game manuals in multiple languages, and a music player so that you can listen to all of the excellent soundtracks in one place. And you're looking at a very good package. Order of Ecclesia is set in the 19th century after the disappearance of the Belmont clan. The titular order are a secret organisation essentially created to tackle Dracula, with the main protagonist Shanoa being chosen as the vessel for the Dominus glyphs. These powerful magical artifacts are supposedly strong enough to defeat Dracula. Unfortunately though, her colleague interrupts the ceremony, makes off with the glyphs, leaving Shanoa up the creek without a paddle or any memories. Portrait of Ruin takes things into a completely different setting. It's in 1944 Europe during World War II, where protagonist Jonathan Morris, who seems to have acquired a certain legendary vampire-killing whip, is joined by Charlotte Orlin, a reasonably talented sorceress, to go and enter Dracula's castle and confront the evil within. And then finally Dawn of Sorrow, that picks up a year after the events of Aria of Sorrow. And I can't really go into the details of this story without spoiling the other two, but what I can say is there's a new cult in town, and you better stop them. Or, well, they're gonna resurrect a certain individual. Gameplay wise, all three have many similarities, with a few notable changes from their original releases. All 3 games allow you to control a character, moving them left and right. You can duck and eventually slide when you unlock that ability, and equip weapons in a primary or secondary hand. You'll also have some special abilities that you can use, like throwing daggers, with Portrait of Ruin also allowing you straight from the get-go to switch between a second character and use their abilities as well, or have them join you. This also introduced the mechanics of being able to have them do co-op actions, like leaving them on a platform as you push it along and then switch back to reach higher ledges, or working together to open a drawbridge. This mechanic also went into some of the special abilities, with these co-op actions forming new power-ups you receive throughout the game. And I believe Igarashi actually introduced that because he liked some of the multiple characters in one of the other Castlevania titles and wanted to bring more of that across. Although obviously the map's completely different for each game, its layout and the layout of the UI remains consistent. However, if you want to change that, in the options you can completely customize the way the game's spread out over the screen. With the DS's 4:3 aspect ratio, the developers have made maximum use of the screen space available, although there is no option to simply have the game and be able to toggle between the other screens. Some may find that a little distracting, but honestly you don't notice it after 5 minutes. Navigation's also assisted with fast travel points and being able to teleport between certain waypoints. The combat is very easy to pick up, and each enemy can be tackled without taking damage once you've learned their patterns. These weapons also allow for combinations as they're equipped to the X and Y buttons, and some of the attacks are tied to a stamina system shown below your health. Some of the extra abilities include being able to grapple between these points, and often it will use a new ability for the next boss fight. One thing I don't like with the games is that enemies respawn entirely when you just leave the area. I know that's a staple of the series, but by their nature you'll do a lot of backtracking, and some sections can be a little tedious. There are a couple of scripted moments as well, like trying to avoid this enemy as you bash through the walls, and with each having a number of secret areas that you can go off and discover. Each title is running at 60 frames per second, that's in docked and handheld, and they look surprisingly good, but we also see some control improvements. Things like the glyph abilities, which are in the third release, Dawn of Sorrow, and which I have to be honest, I was a little worried about on the Switch version. The reason for that is you actually control the touch by holding a trigger and moving an analog stick. It feels super clunky. Thankfully, you can either play in handheld and use touchscreen for things like signing your signature at the start of the game, but also those glyphs. Now the glyph system basically, when you're fighting against a boss, once you've dropped their health low enough, you have to complete a glyph sequence on screen. Obviously if you're using touch, that's not a problem, but it would have been a disaster if you had to do that using the sticks. Instead, what they've done is introduce a button prompt, tying one of the Switch's face buttons to each of the nodes on your glyph, and you simply have to push them in the right order. It's a very good choice, and some might actually prefer that than the original release's implementation. It's just less fiddly. Igarashi is the master of the boss fight, and between these games you're going to find a number of options in that regard. All of them are so well balanced. They never feel unfair, and then you include the fact that if you want to use it, you can actually rewind time in these builds, moving back to a period that suits you and then just jump back into the action. As well as this, we now have save states, so that you don't have to use the in-game save points, especially useful if you want to switch to another game as you can save whenever you want. And we have the ability to customize every single button. Can change what everything does. It's just a really well thought out package from start to finish. Characters level up in exactly the same way as they did back in Symphony of the Night, automatically making you stronger, and that game is probably the one thing that could have made this pack even better. It really would be the icing on the cake. Then you've also got the Haunted Castle game. This is a side-scrolling action game, the very first that I believe was available in the arcades, but you can see much of the DNA, some of the weapons and enemies. It holds up surprisingly well, but the actual remaster, Haunted Castle Revisited, plays excellently. That on its own could be a standalone release, maybe not at full price, but there's enough work in there that it really does hold up. And for fans of the old school arcade action games, it presents quite a challenge. Now we've spoken about visuals and performance. The game does run at 60 frames per second, it looks decent in docked and handheld modes. The 4:3 aspect ratio is going to be the biggest bugbear for some people, and not being able to have the screen just show the game and remove everything else. But other than that, there's not a huge amount to complain about, and it's still some excellent pixel art to this day. The soundtrack across all of the games is outstanding, and there aren't any voice actors, unlike Symphony of the Night on PlayStation, which takes us onto value. Now this entire pack is £19.99. I think that represents incredible value for money. You've got 3 fantastic Castlevania games that have been given some love and attention on the Nintendo Switch to make them feel right at home. That's around about 30 to 50 hours of gameplay even if you were rushing. Plus you've got the 2 extra games, and bear in mind that some of these titles also have things like boss rush modes. We have the gallery with all of those extras and the music player. This is absolutely something I would love to own physically, but even digitally it's representing a great deal of value. For just $19.99, that's not bad at all, is it? Had they also included Symphony of the Night, I think people would have lost their minds, but still well worth the asking price, and if you find it on a sale, I mean, snap it right up. Konami have hit a home run with this one. For those who never played them back on the DS, you have an absolute treat, and for those who did, it's the best way we've ever had to play them. Throw in the extra content they've added, and the Castlevania Dominus collection should be in yours. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content. I hope this was of some use to you. I'm really glad we got a review of this one out. And do let me know if I've missed anything, or if there's anything you want to know. I'll make sure to answer it in the comments. Thanks to our Patreons and our new members for all things Switch all the time. Keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!